Damian Whitmore wasn't the joking type. He was the type who owned half the city, who drove luxury cars that cost more than her shop's annual revenue, and who probably had his suits custom-made by designers she couldn't even pronounce. "Why me?" Emma asked, crossing her arms. Defensively. "You could hire an actress. Someone used to lying for money." Damian's gaze flicked over her, assessing. "Because you're different. You're believable, and because I need someone who won't complicate this." Emma bristled. "Wow, you really know how to flatter a girl." He ignored her sarcasm, stepping closer. "I'm serious. I need this engagement to secure a business deal. The investor? I'm working with values, family, and stability. Qualities I can't fake with just anyone. You, however, have the right look." "The right look?" Damian gestured vaguely at her. "Simple, honest, approachable." Emma's jaw nearly hit the floor. "You mean ordinary. Call it what you want." She stared at him, half tempted to throw the nearest vase at his head. "And what's in it for me, exactly? Because I'm pretty sure you're not here out of the kindness of your heart." His expression softened, just a fraction. "I know about your debts, Emma. Your father's medical bills. The loan on this shop." Her breath hitched. Of course he knew. Men like Damian always had people who knew things. "If you agree," he continued, "I'll pay off everything. The debt, the bills. I'll even help expand your business. You'll never have to worry about money again." Emma's throat tightened. The shop had been her mother's dream, and after losing both her parents, it was all she had left of them. But it was drowning under mounting costs, and no matter how hard she worked, she couldn't seem to pull it back from the brink. But agreeing to this? Pretending to be engaged? To Damian Whitmore? It was insane. "I don't trust you," she said bluntly. "I don't need your trust," Damian replied, his voice cool. "I need your cooperation. Think about it, Emma. You get financial freedom, and I get my deal. It's mutually beneficial." She looked away, her mind spinning. This wasn't just about her pride. It was about stepping into a world where she didn't belong, where people like Damian thrived and people like her were chewed up and spit out. But could she really afford to say no? "How long do I have to decide?" she asked quietly. Damian smirked, already sensing her surrender. "You have until tomorrow, but I'd suggest not wasting time. Opportunities like this don't come often." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving her shop eerily silent in his wake. The next evening, Emma found herself standing in Damian's sleek penthouse, feeling like she'd been dropped into a scene from a movie. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a glittering view of the city skyline, while minimalist furniture and abstract art emphasized the kind of wealth she couldn't even fathom. "So, you've decided," Damian said, his tone more statement than question as he poured himself a glass of wine. Emma swallowed hard. "I'll do it, but on one condition." His brow arched. "Oh?" "You don't get to treat me like one of your employees," she said firmly. "This isn't a dictatorship. If I'm going to help you, I'm doing it on my terms." Damian's lips twitched into what might have been a smile. "Fair enough. Anything else?" "Yes. I want everything in writing. No loopholes, no surprises." "Done." Emma exhaled slowly, her stomach in knots. "Okay then, what happens now?" "Now," Damian said, setting his glass down, "we make this official. There's a charity gala tomorrow night. You'll be by my side as my fiancé." Her heart sank. "Tomorrow? Are you kidding? I don't even have anything to wear." "That's been taken care of," Damian replied smoothly. "A stylist will meet you in the morning. You'll have everything you need." Emma opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. There was no point. She'd already signed up for this. Madness. The next evening, Emma stood at the entrance of the grand ballroom, feeling more out of place than ever despite the breathtaking designer gown Damian had sent over. The floor-length emerald dress hugged her curves perfectly, and the matching heels were unlike anything she'd ever worn. But no amount of luxury could make her feel comfortable in Damian's world. "Relax," Damian murmured as he offered her his arm. "You look stunning." She shot him a sideways glance. "You don't have to lie. I know I'm not exactly high society material." His gaze softened, just enough to catch her off guard. "You're perfect. Trust me." Before she could respond, they stepped into the ballroom, where the air buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of a live orchestra. Heads turned as they entered, whispers following them like shadows. Emma gripped Damien's arm tighter, her nerves threatening to overwhelm her. But he leaned in, his voice low and steady. "Just smile and play along. You've got this." As they moved through the crowd, Emma couldn't help but notice how effortlessly Damien charmed everyone they encountered. He was confident, polished, and maddeningly charismatic. Everything she wasn't. And yet, when they took to the dance floor for their first waltz as an engaged couple, something shifted. His hand on her waist was firm, yet gentle, his movements guiding hers with surprising ease. "You're doing great," he said softly, his breath warm against her ear. Emma looked up at him, her heart skipping a beat. For a moment, the world around them faded, leaving just the two of them in the center of the room. But as the song ended and applause erupted, reality came crashing back. This wasn't real. It was a transaction, a performance. And no matter how convincing Damien was, Emma couldn't let herself forget that. The applause still echoed in Emma's ears as Damien led her off the dance floor, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. Her cheeks burned, both from the intensity of their waltz and the dozens of eyes that had been fixed on them. She could feel the weight of scrutiny, the whispers brushing against her like sharp-edged feathers. "That wasn't so bad, was it?" Damien asked, leaning closer to ensure she heard him over the din of the ballroom. Emma tilted her head to look at him, her expression caught between incredulity and irritation. "Bad? You mean the part where I felt like a fish in a tank while everyone watched and judged me? No, Damien, that wasn't bad at all." His lips twitched, but he didn't quite smile. "You handled it better than most. Holloway noticed, by the way. He approached me earlier and mentioned how refreshing you were." She blinked, caught off guard. "Refreshing?" Damien nodded. "Apparently, you're not what he expected. That's a good thing." Emma's stomach twisted. She wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a backhanded acknowledgement that she didn't belong here. "Glad to know I'm exceeding such high expectations," she muttered. He stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Don't sell yourself short, Emma. You're doing exactly what I need you to do." Something about his tone, soft, almost sincere, made her pause. But before she could respond, a striking blonde in a shimmery silver gown approached them. Her smile was all teeth, and her gaze lingered on Damien a little too long. "Damien, darling, you've been avoiding me all evening," she cooed, placing a manicured hand on his arm. "Care to introduce me?" Emma stiffened, her grip on Damien's arm instinctively tightening. He didn't miss the gesture and covered her hand with his, a calculated move that sent a ripple of heat through her. "Victoria," Damien said smoothly, his voice taking on a colder edge. "This is Emma, my fiancée." Victoria's eyes widened briefly before her smile returned, sharper and more calculating. "Fiancée? I had no idea. Congratulations. Both of you." Emma forced a smile, painfully, aware of Victoria's scrutinizing gaze. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady, even as her pulse raced. Victoria's eyes flicked to Damien, her tone laced with faux sweetness. "You move fast, don't you? I can't wait to hear all about how you two met." Before Damien could respond, Emma decided to take control, her annoyance bubbling to the surface. "It's a funny story, actually," she said brightly, keeping her tone light. "We met when Damien nearly ran me over." Victoria's perfectly arched brows shot up. "Excuse me?" Emma shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "In his car. He wasn't paying attention, and I had to jump out of the way. Romantic, right?" Damien's lips twitched, his eyes glinting with amusement, but he played along. "What can I say? She left quite the impression." Victoria's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "How charming. Well, I'll let you two enjoy the rest of your evening. Lovely to meet you, Emma." As Victoria walked away, Emma let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "She hates me," she whispered. Damien chuckled, his hand still resting on hers. "She hates everyone who isn't her. Don't take it personally." Emma pulled her hand away, suddenly feeling exposed. This is exhausting. How do you do this all the time? You get used to it, he said simply. But the shadow that crossed his face betrayed a hint of weariness. Come on. Let's get some air. Without waiting for her agreement, Damien guided her toward the balcony. The cool night air was a welcome reprieve from the stifling atmosphere inside, and Emma leaned against the railing, taking a deep breath. Are all your events this intense? She asked, staring out at the glittering city lights. Most of them, Damien admitted, standing beside her. But tonight went well. Holloway was impressed, and that's what matters. Emma glanced at him, her earlier irritation fading. For the first time, she noticed the tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders seemed perpetually tight. Does it ever get tiring? Putting on a show for people like Holloway? He looked at her, his expression guarded. It's part of the job. That's not an answer, she pressed. A flicker of something, pain, maybe, crossed his face, before he looked away. It's necessary, he said finally. I don't expect you to understand. Emma frowned. You act like I've never had to fight to survive. Newsflash, Damien. I've been putting on a show my entire life. The stakes might be different, but don't assume I don't get it. Her words seemed to catch him off guard, and for a moment, he didn't respond. Then, quietly, he said, Noted. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it was charged, a current running between them that neither seemed willing to acknowledge. Finally, Damien straightened, his polished mask slipping back into place. Come on, he said. I'll have my driver take you home. The next morning, Emma was greeted by a sleek black car waiting outside her apartment. The driver, impeccably dressed, handed her a note with Damien's familiar, elegant handwriting. Don't argue. Just get in. She rolled her eyes but complied, curiosity outweighing her frustration. The car whisked her away to an exclusive boutique in the heart of the city, where she was greeted by a team of stylists who seemed to be expecting her. What is this? She asked, bewildered. Mr. Whitmore instructed us to ensure you have everything you need, one of the stylists explained with a professional smile. Shall we begin? Emma's protests fell on deaf ears as she was ushered into the boutique. Racks of designer gowns, shoes, and accessories surrounded her, each piece more extravagant than the last. She felt like an imposter in this world of luxury, but as the stylists worked their magic, she couldn't deny the allure of it all. Hours later, when she finally emerged in a fitted navy dress that accentuated her figure perfectly, Damien was waiting. He stood near the boutique's entrance, his gaze sweeping over her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. Well? She asked, crossing her arms. Did I pass inspection? His lips curved into a rare, genuine smile. You look incredible. She hated how much his approval affected her, but she pushed the thought aside. This is too much, she said, gesturing to her new wardrobe. I can't accept all of this. You can, and you will, Damien said firmly. You're in my world now, Emma. I need you to fit in. His words stung, but she bit back her retort. This wasn't about her. It was about the deal, the performance. Still, as they left the boutique, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that she was losing herself in the process. And perhaps more troubling, she wasn't sure she wanted to stop. The car ride to the villa was quiet, but not uncomfortably so. Emma watched the city skyline fade into the distance as the scenery transformed into lush greenery and winding coastal roads. Beside her, Damien was scrolling through his phone, the faint glow illuminating his sharp features. She hadn't asked where they were going. She hadn't needed to. His text earlier that morning had been uncharacteristically cryptic. Pack a bag, something casual. That alone had been enough to leave her both irritated and intrigued. Now, as the car turned onto a private drive flanked by towering palm trees, Emma's curiosity bubbled over. You gonna tell me what this is about? She asked, breaking the silence. Damien glanced at her, his lips twitching into a faint smile. Patience, Emma. She rolled her eyes. You're infuriating. You know that? Frequently. When the car finally stopped, Emma stepped out and found herself staring at what could only be described as paradise. A sprawling villa perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. its white stone facade gleaming in the sunlight. Infinity pools cascaded down the terraces, and the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below filled the air. I don't even have the words, Emma murmured, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. Damien came to stand beside her, his hands casually in his pockets. I thought we could use a change of scenery. Consider it a celebration. Celebration? Holloway signed the deal this morning, Damien said, his tone matter-of-fact, but there was a flicker of pride in his eyes. And you were integral to making that happen. Emma turned to him, stunned. Wait, seriously? You brought me here to celebrate? You sound surprised. I am. You don't exactly strike me as the celebratory getaway type. Damien smirked. There's a lot you don't know about me. That much was true. Despite the time they'd spent together, Damien remained an enigma, a man who revealed only what he wanted you to see. And yet, standing here, with the ocean breeze tugging at his perfectly styled hair, there was something almost vulnerable about him. Come on, he said, gesturing toward the villa. Let me show you around. The interior was just as breathtaking as the exterior. All clean lines, open spaces, and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the ocean like a living painting. But it was the small touches that caught Emma's eye. Fresh flowers arranged on every surface, a stack of books on a side table, the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air. You didn't have to do all this, Emma said as they stepped onto the terrace. I wanted to, Damien replied simply, pouring 2 glasses of champagne from a nearby bottle. To thank you. For what? Pretending to be your fiancé? For reminding me what it's like to have someone who's real, he said, handing her a glass. Emma blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in his voice. She took the glass, her fingers brushing against his, and for a moment the air between them seemed to crackle. To the deal, Damien said, raising his glass. To surviving your world without losing my mind, Emma countered, clinking her glass against his. They both laughed, the tension easing as they sipped their champagne. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon in hues of gold and crimson, the lightness between them began to shift. Why do you do it? Emma asked suddenly, setting her glass down. Do what? All of this, she said, gesturing vaguely. The deals, the parties, the constant performance. Don't you ever want to just stop? Damien's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said quietly, I can't afford to stop. Emma frowned. Why not? He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Because if I stop, it all falls apart. The business, the image, the legacy my father left behind, or what's left of it anyway. There it was again. That flicker of pain she'd seen before, the crack in his armor. What happened to him? She asked gently. Damien exhaled, his shoulders sagging ever so slightly. He walked out when I was 12. Left my mother. Left me, left everything, for someone else. Emma's heart ached at the rawness in his voice. Damien, Don't, he interrupted, his tone sharper than he intended. He ran a hand through his hair, his usual composure slipping. I don't need your pity. It's not pity, Emma said firmly. It's understanding. You think you're the only one who's been abandoned? My mom died when I was 16. My dad worked himself into an early grave trying to keep this shop, our dream, alive. So don't you dare act like I don't get it. Damien stared at her, his defenses wavering. I didn't know. Because you never asked. She said, her voice softening. You can't keep punishing people for what happened in your past, Damien. Not everyone's out to hurt you. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with unspoken words. And then, before Emma could process what was happening, Damien closed the distance between them. His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing against her skin as he leaned in. Her breath hitched, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. But just as his lips were about to meet hers, Emma turned her head, stepping back. I can't, she whispered, her voice trembling. Damien's hand dropped to his side, his expression a mix of confusion and hurt. Emma. I can't do this, she said, her eyes glistening. Because if I do, it won't be fake anymore. And I can't let myself fall for someone who doesn't trust me. Before he could respond, Emma turned and walked away, leaving Damien alone on the terrace with nothing but the sound of the waves crashing below. The next morning, the world came crashing down. Emma's phone buzzed incessantly with messages and calls, but it wasn't until she checked her notifications that she saw the headlines splashed across every tabloid. Whitmore's engagement a sham? Sources claim fiancé is a fraud. Her blood ran cold as she scrolled through the article, which detailed their supposed arrangement and accused her of being a gold digger. By the time she arrived at Damien's office, the tension in the air was palpable. He was pacing behind his desk, his phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders at someone on the other line. When he saw her, he ended the call abruptly, his eyes blazing. "You," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Did you do this?" Emma's jaw dropped. "What? Are you serious?" "Who else could it have been?" "Damien? I would never—" "Save it," he snapped. "How do I know you're not just using me like everyone else?" Emma's chest tightened, her voice breaking as she said, "Because I'm not them. And if you can't see that, then maybe this arrangement was a mistake." For a moment, neither of them spoke, the words hanging heavy between them. Then quietly, Emma said, "I'm done, Damien. I'm done pretending." And with that, she turned and walked out, leaving Damien to grapple with the storm he'd unleashed. Emma sat behind the counter of her flower shop, staring at the familiar chaos of petals and stems scattered across the workbench. The shop had always been her sanctuary, the one place where she could drown out the noise of the world and lose herself in the rhythm of arranging blooms. But today, even the scent of fresh lilies couldn't ease the ache in her chest. Her mind was a storm of emotions. Anger at Damien for accusing her, hurt from the way he'd looked at her, and worst of all, the undeniable longing she couldn't seem to shake. She had walked away from him, told herself that it was over, but her heart hadn't gotten the memo. The bell above the door jingled, snapping her out of her thoughts. A delivery man stood in the doorway, holding a large envelope. "Emma Carter?" he asked. "That's me," she said, standing up. "Sign here, please." She scribbled her name and took the envelope, curiosity prickling at the back of her mind. The delivery man left, and Emma tore it open, her eyes scanning the contents. Her heart stopped. The letter was from her bank. It confirmed that her business loan, every cent of the debt that had been slowly suffocating her, had been paid in full. Her hands trembled as she read and reread the letter, trying to make sense of it. Attached was a note, written in Damien's bold, slanted handwriting. "This shop is your dream, and it deserves to thrive. You deserve to thrive. No strings, no conditions, just you, Emma." Tears welled in her eyes as a flurry of emotions washed over her. Relief, gratitude, disbelief. But most of all, an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. Damien had done this for her. Not as part of their deal, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because he cared. She sank into her chair, clutching the letter to her chest. For the first time in days, the anger began to melt away, replaced by a flicker of hope. That evening, Damien stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored black tuxedo. The charity gala was in full swing downstairs, the hum of conversation and the clinking of champagne glasses drifting up to his penthouse suite. Normally, these events were a routine part of his life. Just another opportunity to network, to close deals. But tonight was different. Tonight, he wasn't here for business. The knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. His assistant poked her head in. "They're ready for you, sir." Damien nodded and took a deep breath. He had spent the past few days thinking about Emma, replaying every moment they'd shared, every word she'd said. For the first time in his life, he had no strategy, no calculated plan. All he knew was that he couldn't let her slip away. As he stepped into the grand ballroom, the room fell silent. Guests turned to watch as he walked to the center of the room, his presence commanding attention as effortlessly as ever. But unlike before, Damien wasn't playing a role. He wasn't here to impress anyone. Except her. He lifted a microphone from the podium, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment." Emma stood near the back of the room, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't wanted to come tonight, hadn't wanted to see Damien again after everything that had happened. But curiosity had gotten the better of her. And now, as his eyes locked with hers across the room, she felt every ounce of her composure slipping. "There's someone here tonight who has changed my life," Damien continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "Someone who reminded me of what it means to be honest, to be vulnerable, to fight for something real." The crowd murmured, heads swiveling to follow his line of sight. Emma's cheeks burned, but she couldn't look away. "I thought I needed her to save my business," Damien said, his voice softening. "But it turns out I needed her to save me." Emma's heart clenched. She wanted to run, to hide from the overwhelming wave of emotions threatening to drown her. But her legs wouldn't move. I was a fool to doubt her, to accuse her of something.